How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt and Mihir Vasava here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast and it's game time. Today on the show, we are talking about a Russian Olympian who is in the middle of a doping scandal. Nothing new, I know, but this one has far-reaching consequences and implications. The authorities involved themselves have said these are quote-unquote exceptional circumstances. This Olympian, Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva, is a 15-year-old. She's a minor, so that in itself makes this case trickier. Russia anyway has some baggage. The athletes compete under the ROC flag, the Russian Olympic Committee flag, because the nation is serving a ban. And also this is playing out at Beijing Winter Olympics, which has already been a troubled edition. So very quickly, Kamila, who is, by the way, an absolute phenom, she took the Beijing Games by storm. Then she received reports that she had tested positive for a banned substance. She was suspended provisionally. That suspension was overturned. There was a hearing and she was back competing at the Games. Mihir, पेचीदा word use karunga फिर से, since it is that sort of an episode. But firstly, before I even get to you, let me share it with our listeners who Kamila is. She is nicknamed Miss Perfect. She was the junior world champion. She had this dominant run and she came into the Beijing Olympics with lofty billing and huge hype behind her. पहले तो रशियन फिगर स्केटिंग चैंपियनशिप्स जो इनकी नेशनल हुई दिसंबर में, वहां पे द फाइनल स्कोर दैट शी अर्न्ड वाज 35 points ahead of the second placed competitor. Then in January, after dominating her nation, she dominated the continent. She was the best performer at the European Figure Skating Championships. वहां पे भी काफी बड़े मार्जिन से she took the gold. And at the Beijing Olympics, firstly she competed in the team event. And she became one of the only 4 women to land a triple axel at the Olympics. उसके बाद में she helped the Russian team win the gold, where she landed a quadruple jump. She became the first woman to land a quadruple salchow and quadruple toe loop at the Olympics. अब ये सब देखिए, हम कोशिश भी नहीं करेंगे समझाने की in audio form on a podcast, but do look up the videos because that will show what sort of a phenomenal talent that she is. Now, Mihir, इस सब के बाद में, after she had helped her team win gold, what were the first signs of trouble brewing that sort of alerted the sporting world that something is up?
So on February 7, that's when the team event took place at the Beijing Olympics. And Kamila, like you mentioned, she did this quadruple jump, became the first woman to execute that at the Olympics successfully. And it really helped Russia to win the team gold medal. Kamila Kaya's dope test was conducted on December 21st at the Russian National Championship, which Gaurav, you mentioned कि जहाँ पर उसने dominate करके medal जीता हुआ था, gold medal जीता हुआ था. But normal timeline जो एक follow करनी चाहिए, which is around 3 to 4 weeks to get the result out and inform the country, the athlete that they have either failed the dope test or it's okay. वो नहीं हुआ timely manner में. And the result actually landed on February 7, just around the same time or just after the team event at the Olympics. So that first of all created this huge controversy and it wasn't also immediately reported. Initially, ऐसे आया था news कि Russia had banned her, then they lifted that ban. It was reported vaguely in the Russian media until it became an all-out open story. उसमें अभी हुआ ये है कि at that time no one knew exactly कि whether she knowingly took the drug or it happened accidentally. And again, because she's just 15 years old, she subverts this WADA का जो rule है, World Antidoping Agency का जो rule है, that those who are below 16 years old and if they're caught in doping, they can't be held liable for what's in their body and it's their entourage that will be questioned. So इतने सारे subplots और layers है इस story में कि even as we record this podcast, there are so many questions hanging in the air. The biggest question for me when this was happening is why was she allowed to compete if she was tested positive for a banned substance? And the only reason that we know so far is the drug that she tested positive for, it is said that it wasn't a performance enhancing drug. So that was one reason. And secondly, the delay in reporting her positive dope test, that the authorities said it wasn't her fault, that it came in middle of the Olympics. So since it came in middle of the Olympics where she was already competing, it wasn't a performance enhancing drug. And also the fact कि they took into consideration the mental aspect कि अगर जो आप बीच ओलंपिक्स से एथलीट को वापस भेज दोगे for no fault of her own, it would just create a bigger problem for her, leave deep scars. So ये सारे issues को रखते हुए they allowed her to compete, but the saga refused to die down after that.
Absolutely. And Mihir, दो चीजें जो आपने mention करी, firstly her age, and right at the top of the episode I mentioned that the authorities have said these are exceptional circumstances, and that's because she's 15 and in Olympic parlance she is a quote-unquote protected person. So that was a key factor in the ruling. The panel said in the statement that when a minor is involved, there is requirement in the WADA to investigate the entourage, like Mihir said, and also Matthew Reeve, who is the CAS Director General. CAS is Court of Arbitration for Sport, of course. And Matthew said the panel considered that preventing the athlete to compete in the Olympic Games would cause her irreparable harm in these circumstances. एक पहले भी ये सब प्लॉट में पॉइंट उठा था कि जैसे मिहिर आपने बताया डिले हुआ था, these findings were not even made public. 2-3 दिन लग गए थे इवेंट होके, मेडल सेरेमनी पोस्टपोन हो गई थी, लोगों को पता नहीं चल रहा था. रशियन आउटलेट्स वर रिपोर्टिंग बट दे वर रिपोर्टिंग इन वेग टर्म्स. उस सब के लिए वो सब जो 3 दिन थोड़ा गुप्त रखा गया, उसके लिए भी इंटरनेशनल टेस्टिंग एजेंसी ITA ने ये बोला था कि यार दे वुड नॉर्मली नॉट इवन नेम अ माइनर, बट दे डिड सो ड्यू टू द कोट द नेसेसिटी फॉर ऑफिशियल इंफॉर्मेशन ड्यू टू हाइटेंड पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट. तो पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट काफी हाइटेंड था बिकॉज लाइक आई सेड शी इज एब्सोल्युटली द बेस्ट फिगर स्केटर इन द वर्ल्ड राइट नाउ, और वो तो नाम भी नहीं देना चाहते थे. सो दैट इज वन पॉइंट. द सेकेंडली, व्हाट वर द ड्रग्स इन क्वेश्चन? नाउ द न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स रिपोर्टेड दैट Valieva's sample included 3 substances that are sometimes used to help the heart, according to a document filed in a hearing. Chief among them is trimetazidine or TMZ, which is a metabolic drug used to treat angina and chest pain caused by lack of blood and oxygen supply to the heart. वो जो है vertigo, tinnitus and blurred vision में भी use किया जा सकता है. And according to the NYT, the other 2 substances listed by Valieva herself on a doping control form are called hypoxin and L-carnitine. ये सब भी भैया हार्ट प्रॉब्लम्स के लिए ट्रीटमेंट में यूज होती है. अब 2 क्वेश्चन मेरे पास मिहिर तुम्हारे लिए हैं. When you say that they were claiming it's not a performance enhancing drug, but it was added to WADA's list of prohibited substances as a hormone and metabolic modulator in 2014. So वहां पे क्या कोई confusion या doubt है? And secondly, what were the reasoning or what were the points made by Valieva and her team की किस तरीके से ये contamination हुआ या क्या reason थे उसके पीछे? What were their, I guess, excuses?
Well, the chief excuse so far by Valieva is that she inadvertently might have taken her grandfather's pill. Her grandfather has a heart condition. Apparently, he is on medication for that, and unki pill by mistake she would have consumed. That is one theory that has been floated around by Valieva and her team. Of course, it's still too early to say whether that actually happened or not, but look, we don't know if she knowingly took it. Based on what has happened in Russia in the past, which we'll come to later on in the show, of course. But एक अगर जो हम history देखें, तो it is highly likely, and it is also a theory that is floated around by many experts that she would have been given the drug by adults around her without her knowledge. And the adults around her basically include the coaches, trainers, the medical personnel that are involved with the team. So there are loads of the entourage the athletes have around them, especially top athletes like Kamila Valieva and others. That's quite huge. So any of the adults from that entourage could have slipped in a drug without her knowledge. Now her coach has told the Russian state TV that when this story first broke, the initial reaction was, look, there are many questions and very few answers when it comes to positive test result. And basically they said that Kamila is clean, she is innocent, and she has got nothing to do with it. But again, a drug has been found in her body, and how it has reached that far is something that has to be investigated.
And as expected, यार, it turned into something much bigger, जिसमें वादा, IOC, सब लोग ही अपने अपने जो हैं अपने स्टेटमेंट्स जारी कर रहे हैं. रशियन ओलंपिक कमेटी, they've said कि यार नहीं, RUSADA, which is the Russian doping agency, they have asked कि यार आप लोग पूरा अच्छा strong investigation करिए entourage में. But the sports minister is very happy. He is basically saying that moral strength that Kamila has shown, and she has shown moral strength, to be fair. उसके बाद में performances when she has returned in the shorter format in the women's singles figure skating, she competed brilliantly. Even though she fell a couple of times, still she topped her beat. और Thursday को हम लोग रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हैं, and later on Thursday she will be competing in the free skate event, जिसमें she is expected to take that gold medal. बाकी सारे fellow athletes जो Russian हैं, they are chanting let's go Kamila and everybody, but United States again, and this is the point that it has blown into something bigger, which is again it's Russia versus the world, where United States Antidoping Agency CEO is saying कि यार, well, only time will tell if she should be competing and whether or not all of her results will be disqualified. But for the 6th consecutive Olympic Games, Russia has hijacked the competition and stolen the moment from clean athletes in the public. US sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson, she had to miss the 2020 Olympics after she tested positive for cannabis. Now, she raised this question saying, can we get a solid answer on the difference of her situation and mine? My mother died and I can't run and was also favored to place top 3. The only difference I see is I'm a black young lady. So, Mihir, discourse has moved on from Kamila. Almost ऐसा हो गया कि यार entourage पे बात आ गई, फिर अब nation पे बात आ रही है. Now it's become this big situation, which is very strange, and I know interesting नहीं है, funny नहीं है, but still it's a very weird situation कि it's all playing out at the Beijing Games, which itself काफी अजीब situation था यहाँ पे भी.
I mean, ये whataboutery is something that I don't understand very honestly. I mean, Sha'Carri Richardson की जो controversy थी, जो story थी, that I don't even understand why it was an issue. To just jog back our memories, just before the Tokyo Olympics, Sha'Carri Richardson was this favorite in women's sprint events for the games, but hardly 1-1.5 महीने पहले she tested positive for cannabis. So the US Antidoping Agency imposed a month-long ban on her, जिससे she got ruled out of the Tokyo Olympics. अभी Sha'Carri Richardson and उसके जो sympathizers हैं, उनका defense ये है कि look, it's only cannabis. She was depressed because of her mother's death and so on. And full sympathies on that front to her, but rules are rules. आप cannabis जो एक banned substance है, आपने वो लिया था, you were caught for it, and you paid the price. So that is that on Sha'Carri Richardson's front. When it comes to Kamila Valieva, well, of course, it is a question that has to be answered कि अगर जो कोई positive है, who has tested positive, doesn't matter whether it is during the Olympics, before the Olympics or after the Olympics, but if someone is tested positive, how is that person being allowed to compete? Now, whatever theories are being floated around, they are there. We don't know what punishment could Kamila receive. I mean, there are people, experts who are saying that if she is ruled ineligible from weeks or months from now, Kamila or the Russian team could be stripped of their gold medals. Even if she wins the women's singles gold medal on Thursday, like you mentioned, Gaurav, that also would be revoked. But right now what has happened is the other competitors, because of this entire saga, they won't get their moment under the sun. They won't get their medals presented the day of the event. So that is a big issue. And the larger thing, right? I mean, what people are saying, what Sha'Carri Richardson is also saying, कि यार मतलब आपके rules क्या है? अभी in the last few years, the anti-doping rules have become so, I don't know how to put it politely, but काफी उसका arbitrary कभी-कभी implementation हो रहा है. Like we saw in case of the Russian team itself, कि athletes were picked and chosen before the Olympics. Authenticity उसकी verify नहीं कर पाए. There are always question marks when it comes to Russian athletes at the Olympics, be it the Summer Olympics or the Winter Games. There was another case involving a Chinese athlete before the Tokyo Olympics, which ran into years-long saga, which was played out at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Ultimately, that athlete wasn't allowed to compete, and it created this another controversy. People are openly questioning एक दूसरे के cleanliness के ऊपर. There are massive doubts being raised on whether the athlete is dope free or if there's something fishy there. तो एक डोपिंग का हमेशा साया रहा ही है on the Olympics. Just that ये दो केसेस जो है of Sha'Carri Richardson and Kamila Valieva, वो थोड़ा सा extreme ends पे ले गए हैं ये पूरे डिबेट को.
Your heart also goes out to fellow athletes and fellow Russian athletes if they are clean, and we have no reason to suspect that they are not. But जो लोग भी अब टीम इवेंट में मेडल जीते थे और जो अभी पोडियम होगा विमेन सिंगल्स के बाद में, there will be no flower ceremony or medal ceremony for them. तो मतलब medals in male पता नहीं कितना उनका glitter रहेगा और it steals from that moment that you have fought for throughout your lives. तो बाकी athletes के लिए भी काफी unfair situation हो गई है. कामिला के लिए हुई है कि नहीं, hopefully will know. But like you said, the pertinent question remains कि यार सिस्टम में अगर बैंड सब्सटेंस था तो why is she being allowed to compete? And Mihir, very quickly, अब हम लोग यार इंट्रो से लेके अभी तक भी थोड़ा रेफरेंस कर ही रहे हैं रशियन बैगेज एंड द रशियन हिस्ट्री एंड व्हाई इट्स ऑलवेज एनी ग्रेट परफॉर्मेंस, एनी ब्रेक थ्रूज आर लुक्ड एट विद अ साइड आई कि यार पता नहीं क्लीन है कि नहीं है, बैन हो रहा है. थोड़ा सा हमारे लिसनर्स को बताइए हिस्ट्री क्या रहा है एंड इज दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ अ पर्सपेक्टिव, दिस पर्सोना दैट रशियन एथलीट्स हैव अर्न्ड फॉर देमसेल्व्स, इज इट फेयर इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ ओलंपिक्स या ये वेल अर्न्ड रेपुटेशन है?
वेल अर्न तो थोड़ी सी है ही. सो इन 2014 विंटर ओलंपिक्स जो सोची में हुए थे इन रशिया, वहां पर उन्होंने काफी एक सोची समझी साजिश भी की थी. आई हैड टू स्लिप दैट जोक इन. सो एट द 2014 ओलंपिक्स, विंटर ओलंपिक्स, एक बड़ी सी मतलब एक अनकवर हुआ था एक स्कैंडल विच वाज बेसिकली दैट द रशियन एथलीट्स वर बीइंग डोप्ड एंड दैट वाज अ स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड एक्टिविटी. एंड यार काफी जबरदस्त सी उनकी वो स्कीम थी जहां पर there were like mouse holes created in the dope testing room जहां पर urine samples of the athletes were exchanged. जो doped athlete थे उनके urine samples were exchanged with clean samples and that's how the entire system ran. वो एक बार हो गया था. That forced the authorities to take action against them. It was decided that the Russian athletes would not be allowed to compete at the Olympics unless they were given special exemptions. और वो special exemptions आपको तब मिलते थे जब you can demonstrate कि आप clean हो, मतलब आपके ऊपर repeated tests होंगे and if you clear those tests then you would be allowed to compete. उसके बाद हुआ ये कि जो उनका डेटा जो उन्हें सबमिट करना था to the World Antidoping Agency, to the IOC, वो डेटा मैनिपुलेटेड था, वो कोशिश की गई थी मैनिपुलेट करने की. सो दैट अगेन एडेड टू द सस्पिशन ऑन द रशियन एथलीट्स. इट इनवाइटेड मोर क्रिटिसिज्म, मोर स्क्रूटिनी ऑन रशिया. बट द करंट स्टेटस इज कि रशियन एथलीट्स एट द ओलंपिक्स कैन compete not as Russia but as Russian Olympic Committee. The technical difference between the two being कि अगर जो आप country को represent करते हो then your flag flies, you can wear your country's colors, your anthem is played at the medal ceremonies, etc., etc. But since you're not competing as a country, since you're competing as Russian Olympic Committee, nothing of sorts can happen. So Russian athletes can't walk into an opening ceremony or a closing ceremony with their country's flag. They have to wear neutral colors. अगर जो मेडल जीतते हैं रशियन एथलीट्स तो उनके कंट्री के फ्लैग वहां पर डिस्प्ले नहीं होते, नेशनल एंथम नहीं बजता है. सो दैट इज द पनिशमेंट, दैट इज द प्राइस दे आर पेइंग. हाउ दिस विल एंड वी डोंट नो, बट वालिएवा's केस हैज वंस अगेन पुट स्पॉटलाइट ऑन द होल स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड डोपिंग थिंग. अगेन वील कम डाउन टू द एज. शी इज 15 एंड कुछ ट्विस्टेड ही एकदम सा माइंड रहेगा अगर जो कोई 15 साल पे खुद से नोइंगली अपने बॉडी में परफॉर्मेंस एनहांसिंग ड्रग्स इंजेक्ट करेगा. सो द वाइडली एक्सेप्टेड थियरी इज दैट समवन फ्रॉम her entourage, some adult around her has doped her. I mean, it's important to emphasize this again and again, and that is why there is this whole specter looming again on Russian team, on Russian Olympics.
Yeah, the fact remains कि हम, or especially मैं, because I was so mesmerized by her routine, that phenomenal athlete and Miss Perfect as her nickname goes, ये सब हम बोल रहे हैं. बट आई गेस वो हमें एस्टेरिस्क लगाना जरूरी है कि हाउ इट प्लेज आउट प्लेज अ ह्यूज रोल इन हाउ वी लुक एट हर एंड हर स्टिल इन प्रोग्रेस लेगेसी. बट हर स्टेटस एज द वर्ल्ड्स बेस्ट फिगर स्केटर डज कम अंडर द स्कैनर अ लिटिल बिट. मेन ये भी सही है यार कि जैसा बेसिकली द यूएस टीम इज, दे आर द फर्स्ट वंस टू मोर्न एंड कंप्लेन, बट द पॉइंट इज ट्रू दैट दे हैव सॉर्ट ऑफ hijacked if not the competition, if not the games itself, but at least the major headlines and everything of the Beijing Games, which has, ठीक है यार, जाते समय काफी कंट्रोवर्सीज का बात था या जो भी था, बट ऑन द फील्ड, वेल ऑन द स्नो, देयर हैव बीन सो मेनी प्लॉट लाइंस, देयर हैव बीन सो मेनी ग्रेट नैरेटिव्स. आप आइलीन गू को देख लीजिए, अमेरिकन चाइनीज हु वाज द पोस्टर गर्ल फॉर दीज गेम्स. शी हैड दिस ग्रेट कम फ्रॉम बिहाइंड विक्ट्री विद अ हेल मैरी इवेंट. उनका फ्री स्की का आप हाइलाइट्स देखिए listeners, there was a big air competition free ski पे जिसमें काफी लंबी छलांगे मारनी पड़ती हैं. In her final run, she was trailing. She landed a left double 16-20. A trick that she had never tried before in the competition. और बिल्कुल लास्ट मतलब बायोपिक रेडी वो मोमेंट था जो था. और मिखाइला शिफ्रिन को देख लीजिए, सेलिब्रेटेड एथलीट हु completely failed, completely faltered during all her runs, and she was left disappointed and crying. She brought up the anxiety and the mental trauma points that Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka previously have brought up. There's the great Shaun White, who I've been seeing since the Winter X Games in 2005. Shaun White has been a constant fixture. I was very interested in Shaun White's run. He basically failed, but he left on a high, I believe, and उन्होंने पीछे काफी लोगों के लिए एक लेगेसी छोड़ी है जबरदस्त. So there have been moments. इंडिया के ही अपने आरिफ खान को देख लीजिए, the slalom run. He couldn't finish the second run, but first में he finished 45th, but that was in absolutely bad weather conditions. बहुत ज्यादा तगड़े कंपटीशन के साथ में he finished the run, so that's something to I guess celebrate. तो moments रहे हैं, and we also need to ensure that Kamila Valieva, though it is the bigger story, and why we're discussing it is because it can blow up into something big, much bigger than it has already. But इसके अलावा भी बीजिंग गेम्स में काफी moments रहे हैं, which I guess कभी फ्यूचर में हम लोग दोबारा विंटर स्पोर्ट्स की बात करेंगे तो हम दोबारा उठाएंगे. At this point, I would like to bring in producer Shashank Bhargava. Shashank, have you ever inadvertently ingested your grandfather's medicine?
I do it all the time, man, all the time. ये मेरे साथ ये सब स्कैंडल मेरे लिए नई बात नहीं है, काफी टाइम से चल रहे हैं.
Inadvertently भी नहीं, तुम तो छीन के ले लेते हो.
बट अगर जो हम इसका कभी अगर जो फ्यूचर में if we do a video podcast और अगर जो हमारे listeners शशांक को भी देख पाते, then शायद कोई शक नहीं रहता कि शशांक looks a little well doped right now. उस पे अगर जो भी डोप टेस्ट की जाएगी, he'll surely be positive.
Cannabis, marijuana, कुछ तो है. Yeah, his eyes are red. He's basically there's this strange smoke floating behind him for whatever reason. शशांक कुछ चल रहा है क्या?
या ऐसे बोल रहे हो ये बंदा नशेड़ी है, इसकी बातों का विश्वास नहीं करे. ठीक है, ये दिन भर गांजा फूकता है. These are what I'm gauging from your comments. By the way, one thing I was curious about while listening to this entire thing was that so the initial drug test happened in December, right?
Yeah.
उसके बाद तो टेस्ट नहीं हो सकते. Like, why is something that happened in December is being, talked about so much now? Or is it just the fact that, that one thing happened, so it...
No, so what had happened is, usually अगर जो दिसंबर में उसकी डोप टेस्ट हुई है, it's not कि आप every day आपका डोप टेस्ट होगा. So it's targeted, but at the same time it's also spaced out sometimes. So अगर someone is under suspicion, then उन पे ज्यादा टेस्ट होती है. But the tests are usually spaced out of competition at least. In Valieva's case, there was no reason as such to doubt her again because of her age. One of the reasons for the delay also was कि the Russian lab जहाँ पर ये पूरी state sponsored doping scheme उनकी execute हुई थी, that lab has been suspended by the international authorities. So the samples of the Russian athletes are sent to a lab in Sweden, जो एक accredited lab है. वहाँ पर उनके sample test होते हैं और उनके results deliver होते हैं. So because of this process, they're saying that it is possible कि शायद ये delay हो गया, which has then led to the other events.
And what do you guys think about the fact, Kamila is just like 15, right? Sure, being a professional athlete and being an Olympic level player, she would know कि consequences क्या होते हैं इन सब चीजों के, and regulations क्या हैं, rules क्या हैं. But this also has to be a systemic problem, right? Because I guess some blame also has to be assigned to the adults around her. What do you think?
Yeah, so that is the whole question, and I think Mihir also brought it up. The whole baggage behind it, the whole state-sponsored mechanism that has been brought to light before. तो वही डर है कि उसी का कहीं ये remnant नहीं हमें दिख रहा हो. And secondly, like you said, it's a very fair point, and the entourage is under scanner, and everybody's been going after them, right from the Russian sport ministry themselves, the minister themselves, and everybody is saying कि यार एक solid investigation होना चाहिए into the entourage, and that is why her age is the key point in this case. Otherwise it would have been a very open and shut case, but because she is 15 and because she is surrounded by her team, तो यहाँ पे they should be questioned at least.
Right, like you mentioned, she comes in the protected person category.
Yeah, ये सब हमने बातें शशांक पूरे 30 मिनट में करी थी, and the fact that वही दो चीजें तुमने एंड में पूछे कि यार ये तो इसके एंटोराज को करना चाहिए क्वेश्चन, एंड आपको क्या लगता है ये कुछ स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड तो नहीं है, तो which अगेन मतलब हमारा हाइपोथेसिस काफी यहाँ पे प्रूव हो रहा है कि समथिंग इज नॉट राइट विद यू. बट हे, आफ्टर बीइंग अ नशेड़ी यू कैन मेक पर्टिनेंट पॉइंट्स एंड आस्क इंक्विजिटिव क्वेश्चंस एंड आई विल रिंग अप माय गाय इन बॉलीवुड राइट अवे.
मेरे पूरे स्कैम का जिस्ट यही है कि इफ यू कैन
जो हमने तुम्हारा फालतू का इमेज बनाया ना, मैं समय हूँ, और ये तो भैया कंक्लूजन का जो लास्ट पैराग्राफ होता है वो ये बंदा देता है हमारे पॉडकास्ट का. आई थिंक कामिला वलिएवा के एंटोराज की तरह वो भी थोड़ा अंडर स्कैनर है इस टाइम, और वो भी हमें इन्वेस्टिगेट करना चाहिए. बट
hey, by the way, did you I'm sorry, just hold on to that. By the way, you guys mentioned that the fact that medal ceremony nahi hogi, right?
Yeah, we did. You've been completely not listening to anything. You
Yeah,
threw the earphones away.
I am so sleep deprived, it's not even funny. It's really hard to focus on things, right?
Please don't cut this out. Please leave this entire bit in, and we need to expose Shashank Bhargava. I know you have the last call on all the editing that goes around here, but this needs to be there at least. मतलब आगे मिहिर हम लोग कभी exhibit A, B और C यही एक 15 मिनट की conversation दिखा सकते हैं. On that note, please stay tuned to the Express Sports Podcast. Game Time comes out every Saturday. आप लोग एप्स में ढूंढिए जो भी आपका प्रिफर्ड ऐप है पॉडकास्ट सुनने का. विच अगेन ब्रिंग्स मी टू क्वेश्चन शशांक, आई एम सॉरी आई एम डूइंग दिस, बट शशांक, अ लॉट ऑफ आवर लिसनर्स, अ लॉट मतलब कम से कम 2 पूछ रहे थे कि सैटरडे को द एपिसोड डिडंट कम आउट ऑन स्पॉटिफाई, ऑन पॉडकास्ट एडिक्ट, ऑन व्हाटएवर डिफरेंट एप्स दैट दे आर यूजिंग. क्या हुआ था सैटरडे को, क्यों हमारा एपिसोड नहीं आया और मंडे को क्यों पब्लिश हुआ?
I mean, it was technically my fault, but there was some changes that happened in the way the episode is distributed. They changed their default settings, and uski wajah se instead of the episode being public, it got published, as a private episode, and we didn't get to know about it much later. So for people who listen to the podcast on the Indian Express platform, they could access it. But those who listen on applications like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and etc., they couldn't listen to the podcast. So although after republishing, we mentioned this point in the description, but yeah, so that is why millions and millions of listeners could not access the episode. But hopefully this won't happen again.
So yeah, I love how this podcast started out as Kamila Valieva ka story and turned into an intervention and interrogation of Shashank Bhargava. But listeners, yeah, do leave your reviews, your feedback on the platforms that you use to listen to this podcast. But more importantly, stay safe. Adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.